My own son and his wife locked my sick wife and me in the basement of our beautiful Victorian home in Charleston, South Carolina, screaming at the top of their voices. This house is ours now. Sitting there in that cold, damp darkness, I leaned close to Eleanor and whispered, "Hush, darling. They don't know what's hidden behind that brick wall." The second their car pulled away, I worked a loose brick free and showed my wife a secret I had kept for 47 years. A secret about my true identity that would completely destroy everything they believed they knew about the Harrington name. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before I begin this story, I would be truly grateful if you could subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me which state or country you're listening from. It always warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. Please enjoy listening. This Victorian house has been breathing for over 105 years. It was built in 1918 by my adoptive father, Dr. Charles Harrington, and it stands proud on Trad Street in Charleston's historic district. The morning sun filters through centuries-old live oaks draped with Spanish moss, casting dancing shadows across our wide wraparound porch. Eleanor and I moved here as newlyweds, young and bursting with dreams. Almost 50 years ago, we raised our son Grayson within these walls, watched him take his first steps on the polished heart pine floors, felt our hearts swell when he graduated college, glowed with pride when he started his own wealth management business, and opened our arms wide when he brought Brooke home as his bride. That was 6 years ago. 6 long, suffocating years since they moved in with us. It started when Eleanor had her first major stroke. Grayson suggested they move into the big master suite upstairs so they could help take care of her. Just temporarily, Dad, he promised, so Eleanor wouldn't have to climb stairs anymore. We moved downstairs into Dr. Charles's old study, thinking it would only be for a little while. Temporarily became permanent. Their belongings invaded every corner of the house. Brooke's expensive French perfumes replaced Eleanor's simple lavender sachets. Their loud conversations about money echoed through rooms that once knew only gentle voices. This particular morning started like every other one. I woke before dawn to prepare Eleanor's medication and fix her the only breakfast she could still swallow after her second stroke. She can barely speak now, but her eyes still sparkle when I read her poetry. I was making her soft scrambled eggs when Brooke appeared in the doorway, wearing a silk robe worth more than most people's monthly salary. "That smell again," she said, not even trying to hide her disgust. "Wilder. I mean Stanley. Couldn't you cook something normal? This house always smells like a nursing home." I kept stirring the eggs, jaw tight, and answered that Eleanor enjoyed these eggs because they were easy for her to swallow. Brooke poured herself $400 coffee and said, "She's not really eating anyway. Doctor, Lawrence said she might need a feeding tube soon, so why pretend otherwise?" The casual cruelty in her voice made my chest tighten. This woman had never shown genuine care for Eleanor. To her, my wife was just an inconvenience, an obstacle to the lifestyle she felt entitled to in our home. I carried the breakfast tray to our bedroom, where Eleanor sat propped against pillows, staring at the garden we had planted together decades ago. Her hand trembled as I helped her eat, but she still managed a small smile. In that moment, surrounded by morning light and blooming jasmine outside the window, I felt a flicker of our old peace. But peace was a luxury we could no longer afford. The floorboards upstairs groaned under heavy footsteps. Grayson was awake, and soon he would join Brooke in the kitchen. They would talk in hushed tones about things they thought I couldn't hear: property values, inheritance laws, the burden of aging parents. Their words cut deeper than they knew as I sat beside Eleanor, holding her fragile hand. I had no idea this would be our last normal morning. An hour later, the footsteps finally stopped. Then came deliberate steps descending the grand staircase. Grayson appeared first in his perfectly tailored navy suit, followed by Brooke in a designer dress that probably cost more than most families spend on groceries in a month. Their entrance carried an unsettling sense of purpose that tightened my stomach. This wasn't their usual casual drift through the house. It was planned, rehearsed. Grayson pulled out the chair at the head of the mahogany dining table. Doctor, Charles's old seat, before speaking in the detached, professional tone he used with clients. Dad, we need to talk. Seriously. Brooke sat beside him, folding her manicured hands, eyes shining with that predatory glint I knew too well. It's about the house, Grayson said, still not looking directly at me. With Mom's condition and everything coming, we've been thinking about the inheritance situation, the bureaucracy, the legal mess when the time comes. A coldness spread through me, not from his meaning, but from how casually he said it. Brooke leaned forward, voice syrupy with false concern. We want to help you avoid problems later. You should sign the house over to Grayson now. A simple gift deed. Just a formality. She slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were official-looking documents already filled out. Proof they had planned this for weeks, maybe months. The house is worth $900,000. Grayson added. This keeps us out of probate. No government interference. I didn't touch the papers. No, I said. And the single word cracked through the room like a gunshot. Brooke's smile dropped instantly. What do you mean, no? She snapped. We're trying to help you. Do you want your only son dealing with government offices when you can't handle things anymore? I looked her straight in the eye and said I understood everything perfectly. And that was exactly why the answer was no. Grayson's face turned red with anger. We live here. We take care of you. We pay for Mom's medications. It's practically our house already, I corrected him quietly. You live in my house, and I take care of your mother. Grayson stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Be reasonable. Mom needs professional care. Palmetto Haven outside Columbia. $6,000 a month. 24-hour staff. You could visit on weekends. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. They had already researched facilities, already planned our removal from our own home. You want to warehouse us, I said quietly. Brooke snapped. We want what's best for everyone. You're being selfish. Grayson has a right to this house. He carries the Harrington name. Something dark flashed in Grayson's eyes. Enough. I'm done arguing. He grabbed my arm with frightening strength and dragged me toward the basement door. At 75, I couldn't fight him off. Grayson, what are you doing? I shouted. This is our house now, he roared, shoving me down the steep wooden stairs. The door slammed, the bolt locked, and in the darkness, only my ragged breathing and Eleanor's frightened whimper remained. We were prisoners in our own home. The basement was a tomb of forgotten memories, cold stone walls pressing in, the musty smell of decades-old dampness filling my lungs. The only light came from a thin crack under the door above, casting everything in eerie twilight. Eleanor trembled beside me on the rough wooden steps, her breathing shallow and labored, each exhale a small cloud in the chilly air. I wrapped my arm around her frail shoulders, feeling how much weight she had lost since the second stroke. Her body felt as delicate as autumn leaves. It's going to be all right, sweetheart, I whispered, though the words felt hollow in this concrete prison. They'll come to their senses soon. But then I heard the sound that shattered every last hope. Car doors slamming, an engine starting, the crunch of gravel as they backed out of our driveway and simply left us there. The silence that followed was deafening. No footsteps above, no voices, just the steady drip of condensation and Eleanor's frightened breathing. We were completely alone. Hours crawled by. My legs cramped from sitting on the hard steps, but I didn't dare move far from Eleanor. She dozed fitfully against my shoulder, jerking awake with small sounds of confusion. Each time I smoothed her gray hair and murmured reassurances, I didn't believe myself. The basement hadn't been used for storage in years. Cobwebs draped the corners like funeral shrouds. Empty mason jars lined forgotten shelves. This was where Dr. Charles used to keep his wine collection when the house still hosted elegant dinner parties. Now it felt like a crypt. As darkness deepened outside, the crack of light under the door grew dimmer. Soon we would be in total blackness. The thought terrified me. Not for myself, but for Eleanor. In her confused state, complete darkness might send her into panic. That's when I remembered Dr. Charles's words. I was 19 when he brought me down here just months after adopting me from the state orphanage. He had been showing me where the water shutoff was and explaining the old electrical system. Then he stopped at the far wall made of rough fieldstone. "Stanley," he had said, voice unusually serious. "There's something here you need to know about. Something for the most desperate of times." His weathered hand pressed against one particular stone. "Your real father taught me that a man should always have a final card to play. Promise me you'll remember this place." I had been young and distracted, more interested in my new life than old secrets. But now, 47 years later, those words rang with crystal clarity. Desperate times. If this wasn't desperate, nothing was. "Eleanor, honey, I need to check something," I whispered, helping her lean against the stair railing. "Stay right here. I'll be just a few feet away." I stood on shaking legs and made my way carefully across the uneven floor. Old furniture loomed like sleeping giants in the gloom. I bumped into a forgotten rocking chair, stubbed my toe on a wooden crate, but kept moving toward the back wall. The fieldstone foundation felt rough and cold under my palms. I ran my hands along the surface, searching for anything unusual. Most of the stones were mortared solidly in place, but then my fingers found what I was looking for. One stone was different. It moved slightly under pressure, as if it had been carefully loosened and replaced countless times over the decades. My heart pounded as I pressed harder, feeling it give way with a soft, grinding sound. The stone slid inward, revealing a dark cavity behind it. I reached into the hidden space, my fingers trembling with anticipation and fear. What I found was small, rectangular, and cold to the touch. Carefully, I pulled it out. An old Prince Albert tobacco tin, the kind popular when I was a child. Its surface was tarnished with age, but I could still make out the faded red lettering. "What is it?" Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper from across the basement. "I'm not sure yet." "Sweetheart," I called back, though my pulse was racing. Whatever Dr. Charles had hidden here, it was important enough to keep secret for nearly 5 decades. I made my way back to the steps, clutching the tin like a lifeline. Then I remembered Dr. Charles's old toolbox should still be on the shelf near the stairs. I fumbled around until my fingers found it, and inside, miraculously, was a small flashlight that still worked when I clicked it on. The weak beam was enough. Sitting beside Eleanor again, I held the tin under the flashlight's glow. The lid was stuck tight with age and moisture. But after several tries, it finally popped open with a soft click. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were papers. Old papers yellowed with time but still perfectly legible. My hands shook as I unfolded the first document under the flashlight beam. It was a birth certificate, but not the one I had always known. This one bore a name that made my blood freeze. Michael Reynolds, born in Columbia, South Carolina on the exact same date as my birthday. Mother's name, Sarah Reynolds. Father's name, William Reynolds. But as I unfolded the second document, the impossible became undeniable. It was an official adoption decree, stamped and sealed. Michael Reynolds, aged 6 months, adopted by Dr. Charles Harrington, widowed physician of Charleston, South Carolina. The child's new legal name, Stanley Harrington. My entire identity, everything I thought I knew about myself, crumbled in that moment. I wasn't Dr. Charles's distant nephew taken in after my parents died in a car accident. The story I had been told my whole life. I was Michael Reynolds, adopted from complete strangers. The third document was a letter written in Dr. Charles's familiar handwriting. Under the flashlight's beam, I could clearly read every word. My dear son, if you are reading this, desperate circumstances have brought you to this hiding place. Your father, William Reynolds, was chief of staff to the governor of South Carolina, a brilliant man who served his state with honor. But in 1948, he was accused of leaking classified military information, betraying secrets during the early Cold War years. I knew William personally as physician to the governor's mansion, and I never believed those accusations for a second. But your father became a scapegoat. He took his own life in prison rather than endure a public trial that would destroy his family forever. Your mother Sarah was left with nothing but shame and a baby whose father's name had become poison in South Carolina politics. I offered to adopt you, to give you my name and my protection. The Reynolds name would have followed you like a shadow, closing every door that the Harrington name opened. Guard this secret, my son. There are those who would use it to destroy everything you have built. My mind reeled with the implications. Everything. My marriage to Eleanor, my acceptance into Charleston society, my business connections, even Grayson's pride in the Harrington legacy. All of it was built on a foundation that could crumble if this truth ever came out. Stanley. Eleanor's voice was stronger now, filled with concern. What does it say? The flashlight beam trembled in my hand as I watched her face process what she was seeing. Her eyes moved from the birth certificate to the adoption decree, then to Dr. Charles's letter. I could see the exact moment understanding dawned. Her mouth opened slightly, and she looked at me as if seeing a stranger for the first time. Michael Reynolds, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're not really Stanley Harrington. I set the flashlight down carefully, its beam creating a small circle of light in our dark prison. No, sweetheart, I'm not, I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue, as if I were confessing to a crime I had unknowingly committed for 75 years. I just learned this myself right now. Reading Dr. Charles's letter. I'm as shocked as you are. She reached out with a shaking hand to touch my face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines she had known for decades. What did Dr. Charles tell you growing up? What lies did we both believe? My chest tightened as I recalled the carefully constructed story. He told me my parents were his distant cousins, good people who died in a car accident when I was 6 months old. He said he took me in because family takes care of family, and I never questioned it. Why would I? And now? She asked, voice barely a whisper. Now everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie. I picked up the letter again, hands shaking. According to this, my real father was William Reynolds, chief of staff to the governor, but he was accused of betraying state secrets. I could see her face pale in the flashlight's glow. Dr. Charles wrote that he never believed the accusations, that William became a scapegoat, but it didn't matter. He took his own life rather than face a public trial. His name became poison in South Carolina politics. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what this meant. So Dr. Charles saved you, she finally said. He saved me from being the son of a man branded a traitor. But he also built my entire life on a lie. Our marriage, my business, our place in Charleston society. All of it existed because people believed I was a Harrington, not a Reynolds. What does this mean for us now? She asked. Though I could see in her eyes she was beginning to understand. It means we have something Grayson doesn't know about, I said slowly. The plan forming in my mind. He spent his whole life being proud of the Harrington name. building his wealth management business on that reputation. His clients are senators, old South Carolina families who care deeply about bloodlines and honor. A slow understanding spread across her face. If they knew he was the grandson of William Reynolds, his business would collapse overnight. No politician would trust him with their money. No elite family would let him manage their fortune. The very people he courts would turn their backs on him. And he has no idea. She breathed. None at all. To him, we're just inconvenient old people standing in the way of his inheritance. He thinks the Harrington name gives him the right to everything. This house, respect, social standing. But it's all built on Dr. Charles's carefully constructed lie. I looked at the papers scattered around us, then back at my wife's face. If our son wants to treat us like prisoners in our own home, maybe it's time he learned what real consequences feel like. The weight of 47 years of deception settled on my shoulders. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than helplessness. I felt power. Above us, floorboards creaked again. Heavy footsteps crossed the kitchen, then moved toward the basement door. My heart jumped into my throat. "They're coming back," I whispered quickly, gathering the papers and stuffing them back into the tobacco tin. The heavy bolt scraped against metal, and suddenly light flooded our dark prison. Grayson stood silhouetted in the doorway, his expensive suit wrinkled from whatever he had been doing while we sat in that basement for hours. Behind him, Brooke looked down with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. "Well," Grayson asked, voice dripping with smugness, "have you had enough time to think about our offer?" I helped Eleanor to her feet, feeling how much weaker she had become in those cold hours. Her legs trembled beneath her, and I could hear the wheeze in her breathing had gotten worse. The damp air had not been kind to her condition. "Grayson," I said, letting exhaustion and defeat color my voice, "your mother needs medical attention. The stress, the cold air down there. Please let me call Dr. Lawrence." Brooke stepped forward, face brightening with what looked like genuine concern. "Oh my God, is she having another episode? We can't have her collapsing on us." "Just let me make one phone call," I pleaded, supporting Eleanor's weight against my shoulder. "Doctor, Lawrence knows her condition. She needs to be examined." Grayson studied us both for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. A sick mother-in-law was the last thing he wanted on his hands. "Fine," he said finally. "One call. But make it quick and no funny business." He handed me his cell phone, watching carefully as I dialed. But the number I called was not Dr. Lawrence. It was one I had memorized from a business card I kept in my wallet for 4 years. An attorney who specialized in complex elder abuse and estate cases. Margaret Whitfield and Associates. "Yes, this is Stanley Harrington," I said, keeping my voice steady and clinical. "I need to schedule an urgent consultation regarding a medical directive for my wife and possible fraud against our estate. Can Mrs. Whitfield see me this afternoon?" Grayson relaxed slightly, hearing what sounded like a routine medical appointment. Brooke had already lost interest and was examining her manicured nails. "Certainly." "Mr. Harrington," the receptionist replied. "Mrs. Whitfield has an opening at 4 o'clock. Shall I put you down?" "Yes." "Thank you. I'll bring all the necessary documentation with me." I ended the call and handed the phone back to Grayson. "Doctor, Lawrence wants to see her medical records and insurance information. I need to gather some paperwork and meet with her this afternoon." "Good," Grayson said, pocketing his phone. "Maybe now you'll start being reasonable about what's best for everyone." "Maybe I will," I replied quietly, helping Eleanor toward our bedroom. "Maybe I will." 4 hours later, I sat across from Margaret Whitfield in her elegant office on King Street in downtown Charleston. She was a woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I had brought Dr. Charles's tobacco tin with me, and now its contents lay spread across her polished mahogany desk. Margaret studied the birth certificate, the adoption decree, and Dr. Charles's letter with the focused intensity of a surgeon. When she finally looked up, there was something almost predatory in her smile. "Mr. Harrington, or should I say Mr. Reynolds, this is quite remarkable," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "Your son has built his entire wealth management business on relationships with South Carolina's political elite, hasn't he?" "Yes," I replied. "His client list reads like a who's who of state government and old Charleston families, and they trust him because they believe he comes from Honorable Harrington stock." "Exactly." Margaret's smile widened. "Well, Mr. Reynolds, I believe we have everything we need." 1 week later, I was sitting in our living room reading the morning paper when the doorbell rang. Through the lace curtains, I could see a black sedan parked in our driveway. Expensive. Professional. The kind of car that meant serious business. Margaret Whitfield stood on our wraparound porch, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Behind her stood a younger attorney from her firm. "Mr. Harrington," Margaret said with a slight nod, "I believe we have some documents to deliver." The sound of footsteps on the stairs told me Grayson had heard the doorbell. He appeared in the hallway, straightening his tie, clearly curious about our unexpected visitors. Brooke followed close behind, her face already showing suspicion. "Can I help you?" Gentleman Grayson asked, stepping forward with the confident air of a man who believed he owned everything in sight. "Grayson Harrington," Margaret asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. "That's right. And you are Margaret Whitfield, attorney at law. I represent the legal interests of the actual owner of this property." She opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "This is for you." Grayson took the envelope with obvious confusion, tearing it open with casual arrogance. I watched his face as he began to read. Saw the exact moment confusion transformed into disbelief, then into something approaching panic. "Eviction notice." He sputtered, voice cracking. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Brooke snatched the papers from his hands, her eyes scanning the legal language with growing alarm. "This says the house belongs to Stanley, not you. This says our deed of gift." She looked up, face pale, fraudulent. "I'm afraid so," Margaret replied with professional calm. "Our investigation has revealed that the document you presented as a legitimate transfer of ownership is in fact a rather poorly executed forgery. The notary whose seal appears on your papers died 4 years before the alleged signing date." "That's impossible," Grayson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "What's more concerning," Margaret continued, voice sharpening, "is that this attempted fraud raises serious questions about your family's legal standing in this community. Questions that might require a full public investigation into your genealogical background, your true heritage, your right to use the Harrington name in your business dealings." The color drained completely from Grayson's face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the kind of investigation that makes front-page news in the Post and Courier," Margaret said. "The kind your business partners and clients read over their morning coffee. The kind that raises uncomfortable questions about bloodlines and family honor." Brooke grabbed Grayson's arm, her fingernails digging into his expensive suit jacket. "What genealogical background?" "You have 30 days to vacate the premises," Margaret concluded, snapping her briefcase shut. As the lawyers walked back to their sedan, I noticed Grayson's hands were shaking as he pulled out his cell phone. "My business partners," he said, voice hollow. "They're going to start asking questions." 3 days later, our living room was packed with people I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. Grayson had called an emergency family meeting, and the urgency in his voice had brought them all running. Cousin Edward sat stiffly on our antique sofa, his wife Louise beside him clutching her purse like a shield. Two of Grayson's biggest business partners, men in expensive suits who usually treated me with polite distance, occupied the wingback chairs near the fireplace. The atmosphere was thick with tension and barely concealed panic. I could see it in Grayson's face, the way his hands trembled slightly as he paced back and forth in front of Dr. Charles's old mahogany bookshelf. Brooke sat perched on the edge of an ottoman, her usual composure cracked like a broken mirror. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Grayson began, voice carrying that forced confidence of a man trying to convince himself as much as his audience. "We're dealing with a family crisis here, a legal attack on our home, our heritage, everything the Harrington name represents." He gestured toward me with barely contained frustration. "My father has been influenced by an unscrupulous lawyer who's filling his head with lies about property ownership and family history. At his age, with the stress of caring for Mom, I think he's becoming confused about reality." Edward shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Stanley has always been sharp as a tack," Grayson said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm suggesting we need to consider conservatorship. Dad is making decisions that could destroy this family's reputation, tear apart everything we've built. He's believing conspiracy theories about forged documents and genealogical investigations." Louise leaned forward, voice gentle but concerned. "Stanley, dear, is this true? Are you having trouble with memory or judgment?" I looked around the room at these people, some family, some business associates, all of whom had known me for decades. They had seen me build a successful career, raise a son, care for my wife through her illness. The suggestion that I was mentally incompetent was so absurd it was almost insulting. "No, Louise," I said quietly, standing up from my chair. "My memory and judgment are perfectly clear. In fact, I'd like to share something with all of you that might explain why Grayson is so desperate to discredit me." I walked to the small side table where I had placed Dr. Charles's tobacco tin that morning, knowing this moment would come. Grayson is right about one thing. This is about family history and heritage, but not in the way he thinks. "Dad, don't," Grayson warned, voice sharp with panic. "You're going to embarrass yourself. The only person who should be embarrassed," I said, opening the tin and removing the yellowed papers, "is the man who spent his entire life taking pride in a name that isn't rightfully his." The room went dead silent. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the distant sound of traffic on Trad Street, the sharp intake of breath from Louise. "My real name is Michael Reynolds," I continued, holding up the birth certificate so everyone could see it. "I was adopted as an infant by Dr. Charles Harrington after my biological father. William Reynolds was accused of leaking state-of-state secrets and died in prison rather than face trial." Edward's face went white. Louise's hand flew to her mouth. The business partners exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their sudden desire to be anywhere else. "Grayson has built his wealth management firm on relationships with South Carolina's political elite," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "His clients trust him because they believe he comes from honorable Harrington stock. But he doesn't. He's the grandson of a man accused of treason, and every handshake, every deal, every client relationship is built on that lie." The room fell silent as everyone stared at my son in disgust. 6 months have now passed since that devastating afternoon in our living room, and the silence in our Charleston home has never felt so peaceful. The kind of silence that comes not from emptiness, but from the absence of toxicity, from the removal of people who brought nothing but tension and greed into our home. Grayson and Brooke left Charleston the very next day. I heard through Cousin Edward that they packed their belongings in the middle of the night like thieves fleeing a crime scene. Within a week, Grayson's firm had collapsed. His clients, Those prestigious political families and old Charleston money, who valued reputation above all else, withdrew their accounts faster than you could say Reynolds. The scandal of his fraudulent deed combined with the revelation of his true heritage made him radioactive in Charleston's tight-knit financial community. They moved to some small town in Alabama. I'm told Brooke found work as a receptionist at a beauty salon. Grayson. Well, nobody seems to know what Grayson does now. He certainly doesn't call or write. For me, he simply ceased to exist, like the ghost I once told him he was. But this story isn't really about Grayson's downfall. It's about what came after. Eleanor's health has improved remarkably since the stress left our house. Without the constant tension. Without Brooke's cruel comments and Grayson's entitled demands. My wife has found a kind of peace that has allowed her body to heal. She still struggles with the effects of her strokes. But her appetite has returned. Her sleep is restful. And most importantly, her smile has come back. We made some changes to the house. That basement where we discovered the truth about my past. I hired contractors to transform it into something beautiful. A bright, airy space with proper lighting and ventilation. It has become my personal study, lined with bookshelves and filled with comfortable chairs. Sometimes I sit down there in the evenings, not thinking about secrets hidden behind walls, but simply enjoying the quiet satisfaction of a space reclaimed. Our neighbor Walter Brooks stops by most afternoons now. He's a widower about my age who lives 3 houses down, and he has become something of a godsend. He helps with yard work, brings us vegetables from his garden, and most importantly, he treats Eleanor with the gentle respect she deserves. It's funny how removing toxic people from your life makes room for genuinely good ones to enter. I've learned something profound in these past months. Family isn't just about blood or shared names. It's about love, respect, and genuine care for one another's well-being. Grayson shared my adopted name, lived in my house, and called me father for 40 years. But Walter, who has known us for only 6 months, has shown more true family spirit than my son ever did. The Harrington name that I carried with such fear for so many years. It doesn't define me anymore. Neither does the Reynolds name I was born with. I am simply Stanley, a man who loves his wife, tends his garden, and has learned that the most precious inheritance we can leave behind isn't money or property, but the example of how we treat the people who depend on us. Doctor, Charles saved me from the shame of my father's accusations, but in the end, it was standing up to my own son's greed that truly set me free. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars or deeds, but in the love we give and the dignity we maintain, even in our darkest hours. Looking back on this true story, I realize I made a terrible mistake that nearly cost me everything. I spent 75 years living a lie, carrying the weight of a secret that didn't need to be shameful. Don't be like me. Don't let fear of judgment keep you from living authentically. The truth has a way of setting us free, even when we think it will destroy us. My grandpa's stories taught me that family isn't about bloodlines or prestigious names. It's about the people who stand by you when darkness falls, who care for you without expecting anything in return. Doctor. Charles Harrington gave me his name. But it was Eleanor's unwavering love and Walter's genuine friendship that showed me what true family really means. This true story isn't just about inheritance or greed. It's about the inheritance of character we pass down to future generations. We can choose to raise children who value compassion over wealth, integrity over status. God knows I failed in that regard with Grayson, but perhaps sharing these grandpa stories can help others avoid my mistakes. The greatest lesson from this true story: don't wait for crisis to reveal your authentic self. Don't let pride and fear rob you of genuine relationships. The people who truly matter will love you for who you are, not for the name you carry or the house you own. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt grandpa stories and tell me in the comments what family lesson has shaped your life the most. Your stories matter just as much as mine. Thank you for listening.